At 6 a.m., soft morning sunlight streamed through the hallways of Brookhaven City Hall in Massachusetts. Abigail Murphy squinted at the light filtering through the windows as she carefully moved her mop across the floor. At 29, her well-manicured nails gleamed in the morning light, but her hands showed the strength of someone who wasn't afraid of hard work. "This weekly cleaning ritual has a special meaning for me," Abigail murmured quietly as she meticulously polished the hallway of the historic building constructed in the 1920s. Each of her movements carried an almost ceremonial carefulness. The old marble hallway bore the footprints of generations of citizens. With each step she took, it was as if she was adding her own journey to those that came before. As she pulled out a fresh mop from the supply closet, her eyes momentarily clouded over, chasing a distant memory. 20 years ago. That morning's scene had been like another world entirely, so pristine and perfect. A white mansion in the upscale Oakwood Heights neighborhood. The three-story residence, which beautifully harmonized modern architecture with traditional New England style, had been designed by her mother Jane herself. The atmosphere at the breakfast table that morning was tense. "Abigail, sit up straight," Jane's voice broke the silence. Her mother had made a name for herself as a partner at one of the state's top architectural firms. Beneath her perfectly pressed suit collar, hints of fatigue were barely visible. She had been up late again, wrestling with proposals for a new project. Her father Thomas reached for his coffee without looking up from the Wall Street Journal. As vice president of an investment bank, he despised showing any emotion. In his world, everything was measured by numbers and results. Monday mornings were especially tense. The stock market's performance would determine his mood for the day. "Mother, I got my SAT practice test results. I was top in mathematics," 15-year-old Caitlin began hesitantly. Attending the state's top school, she desperately tried to live up to her parents' expectations. Her long brown hair was neatly braided, and her uniform blazer was spotless. Beside her, 12-year-old Elizabeth quietly ate her scrambled eggs. Fresh from winning last week's piano competition, her posture was as perfect as if she were on stage. Her fingers still showed traces of hours of practice. And finally, 9-year-old Abigail. The small girl with unusually large, clear eyes was hunching over her pancakes again. Her uniform tie was slightly crooked, drawing her mother's sharp gaze. The Murphy family was known for generations as an elite lineage of prestigious school graduates. Their great-grandfather had been a Harvard professor, and their grandfather had risen to become a federal judge. That tradition hung like a heavy chain around the children's shoulders. Mother Jane constantly struggled with the pressure to perfectly balance work and family life, and it showed in her words and actions. She worked late into the night but still got up at 6 a.m. to prepare family breakfast. Her life was filled with minute-by-minute schedules. Father Thomas had gradually lost emotional connections with his family amid his grueling Wall Street work. For him, showing love meant paying expensive private school tuition and taking them to luxury resorts on vacation. Abigail's sisters lived desperately under that pressure. Caitlin endured endless studying, while Elizabeth bore 6 hours of daily practice with a smile. Both believed that meeting their parents' expectations was the only way to be loved. But Abigail was different. Yesterday in history class, the teacher said something interesting. "Abigail." Her mother's voice cut sharply through the air. "Stop this nonsense talk at the breakfast table." Abigail fell silent. Something flickered behind her eyes. She had only wanted to share what she'd read in a library book. Even though she struggled with math, she had more detailed knowledge of history than anyone else in class. Just yesterday, her teacher's eyes had lit up at her questions about the Civil War. But in this house, that meant nothing. Here, only SAT scores and chances of getting into top universities mattered. Silence descended once again on the Murphy family breakfast table. Outside, a cold early spring rain began to fall. No one noticed, but it was an omen of what was to come. The shadows of raindrops sliding across the dishes looked almost like tears. After school, Abigail sat in her usual spot at the library. Third floor of Brooks Memorial Library, by the window in the history section. From here, she could see the town center and watch the shadow of the old clock tower stretch across the landscape. Back again. Librarian Carol Foster smiled kindly. What are you reading today? Materials about slave emancipation during the Civil War. Abigail's eyes sparkled as she answered. You know, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation actually had much deeper political implications. Carol listened to the girl's explanation, secretly amazed. Such insight seemed impossible for a 9-year-old. The library was Abigail's only sanctuary. Here, no one criticized her. Math scores and poor posture didn't matter here. Earlier that day, when classmate Jennifer had come to her crying, Abigail had drawn on knowledge gained from her library reading. I messed up terribly at the ballet recital. I never want to dance again. Abigail remembered a story from Isadora Duncan's biography. Did you know? Even world-famous dancers have fallen during their debut performances. But it was because of that failure that they became stronger. Jennifer's eyes brightened slightly. Really? Yes. And everyone fails sometimes. What matters is what you do afterward. After school, Mr. Harris, their homeroom teacher, had heard about this conversation in the staff room and was impressed. Abigail has a gift for reading people's hearts. She has a special talent for empathizing with others' pain. However, everything changed when she got home. What is this? Mother Jane held up a math test paper. The red 65 looked like a brand of shame. I made a mistake in the calculations. I don't want to hear excuses, her mother's voice rang cold. Your sisters never got scores like this. Abigail stayed silent, looking down. Caitlin glanced at her worriedly but couldn't say anything. Elizabeth disappeared into the piano practice room. That's when Father Thomas came home. Earlier than usual. What's going on? Look at your youngest child's magnificent achievement. Mother thrust the test paper forward with visible disgust. Father stared at the test paper silently, then sighed. A Murphy child, getting such a score. But I did well in history. Silence. Mother's voice trembled. Enough. History, books, all these useless things. If you can't meet our expectations. At that moment, a loud thunderclap shook the house. A spring storm had suddenly descended upon the town. You're our shame, Mother continued, as if delivering a verdict. A failure. The test paper was torn apart in front of Abigail's face. The torn pieces fluttered down like white butterflies. Get out. But the rain. Get out. Mother flung open the front door. You're no daughter of mine. The rain drove in sideways. Father reopened his newspaper, acting as if his daughter wasn't there. Abigail clutched at her uniform collar with trembling hands. She hadn't even changed clothes yet. There was no time to grab her school bag with homework or her favorite history book. "Please." There was no response. When Abigail was thrown out into the rain, she was 9 years old. From the enviable white mansion in the upscale Oakwood Heights neighborhood, a single girl was cast out. The heavy rain soaked through her form. Her uniform was drenched within moments. Looking back, she could see her sister's shadows in the second-floor window. Caitlin appeared to be crying. Elizabeth withdrew into the shadows behind the curtains. Thunder crashed again. Abigail began running toward the library. Her wet shoes felt heavy, and she nearly stumbled several times. But she couldn't stop. At 7 p.m., as street lights began flickering on one by one. On her way to Brooks Memorial Library, something was changing profoundly within Abigail's heart. Her tears were indistinguishable from the rain. When Abigail pushed open the heavy doors of Brooks Memorial Library, water was still dripping from her uniform. The sound of water droplets echoed through the usually silent lobby. "Oh my goodness!" Librarian Carol Foster rushed out from behind the counter. She quickly grabbed a blanket from the coat rack and wrapped it around the soaking wet girl. "What happened?" Abigail's trembling lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, large tears rolled down her cheeks. "First, we need to get you warm." Carol led her to the librarian's office. "Let me make you some tea." It was Abigail's first time in the librarian's office. Bookshelves covered the walls. Old photographs and certificates hung as decorations. Newspaper clippings were neatly arranged on the desk. One showed a younger Carol with the headline, "City Council Member Carol Foster Submits Education Reform Bill." "Here's some hot milk tea." Carol offered a porcelain cup. "And chocolate chip cookies I baked this morning. Don't tell anyone," she added with a wink and smile. The warm tea seeped into her core. The sweet aroma of cookies gradually unwound Abigail's tension. "Want to talk about it?" Carol's voice remained as gentle as ever. Abigail slowly began weaving her words together. The math test. Her mother's words. Being cast out into the rain. By the time she finished, the teacup was empty. "I see." Carol sighed deeply. "The Murphys." At those words, Abigail looked up. 20 years ago, when I was on the city council, I submitted an education reform bill. I wanted to give every child the opportunity to develop their own unique talents, Carol continued, gazing at the wall photos. But there was strong opposition from those who wanted to preserve the existing education system. Your parents were at the forefront of that opposition. The sound of rain gently enveloped their silence. But you have a special gift. Carol pulled a notebook from her desk drawer. "I've been watching. The way your eyes shine when you read history books. Your insight when solving friends' problems. And above all, your keen sensitivity to social inequities." Abigail caught her breath. This librarian had seen aspects of her that no one else had ever understood. "Actually, I received an email this afternoon," Carol continued while pouring fresh tea. "From Mr. Harris. About how you encouraged Jennifer today. He said it was wonderful how you handled it." Outside, the thunder was growing distant. The rain continued to fall. "I see the qualities of a future leader in you. Not math scores, but the power to understand people's hearts and change society." Just then, the library's front door chime rang. 2 police officers appeared, along with Aunt Sarah. Abigail. Sarah rushed over, soaked through. We've been desperately searching for you. Carol stood and had a brief conversation with the officers. Meanwhile, Sarah held Abigail tightly. It's all right now. I'll take care of you, Sarah's voice carried determination. I'll correct my sister's foolish decision. The next few hours passed like a dream. Police statements. Meetings with Child Protective Services social workers. The formal procedures for Sarah to become legal guardian. Throughout it all, Carol never left Abigail's side. May I come here every weekend? Abigail asked in a small voice as the night grew late. Of course, Carol beamed. Actually, I have a proposal. I have retired teacher's credentials. If you'd like, I could teach you other subjects besides history on weekends. Sarah agreed immediately. That's wonderful. Abigail, I'm so glad you found someone who truly understands your talents. That night, after a warm shower at Sarah's house, Abigail fell into her most peaceful sleep in a long time. By her pillow lay a book Carol had lent her. Changemakers, Stories of American Civil Rights Activists. On the cover, Carol had written, "To my dear Abigail. Your story begins here. Love, Carol." The next morning, as the eastern sky began to lighten, Abigail awoke. Outside her window, the rain had stopped, and a new day was dawning. For the first time, she saw hope in her future. Carol's words echoed quietly in her heart. You have the power to change society. At 9 years old, Abigail had finally found her path. It was a road to entirely new possibilities that couldn't be measured by numbers or grades. 10 years later. Abigail Murphy's thesis, Inequality in the American Education System and Paths to Reform, has received the highest honors in Harvard University's Political Science Department this year. The dean's voice resonated through the vast auditorium. Beside Abigail in the front row, Carol had tears in her eyes. Sarah smiled proudly. After the graduation ceremony, the three celebrated at a small Italian restaurant in Cambridge. Remember? Carol said, lifting her red wine. What I told you that rainy night in the library. You have the power to change society, Abigail smiled. Those words became my driving force. College life had vastly expanded Abigail's possibilities. Analytical skills honed in political science classes. Educational support volunteering in extracurricular activities. During summer break, she launched a learning support program for children in impoverished areas, earning high praise from the community. But this is just the beginning, Abigail said with determination. I want to return to Brookhaven and create real change. True to her word, she returned home. She began working at the city's Board of Education while attending law school at night. Learning the realities of education during the day, acquiring legal knowledge at night. These efforts gradually bore fruit. At age 27, a major turning point arrived. I intend to run for mayor, Abigail quietly declared in Carol's living room. Most people will say you're too young, Carol replied while preparing her usual tea. But that's my strength. We need new perspectives, new ideas. The election campaign proved more challenging than expected. Criticism of lack of experience and too young came as expected. But Abigail had her weapons. Hundreds of citizens she'd met through educational support volunteering. Policymaking abilities learned in law school. And above all, strong convictions born from her own experiences. During her campaign, she always stopped by the library. The now aging Brooks Memorial Library. There, she remembered her origins. When I become mayor, I'll first create an education support center. A place where every child can develop their own talents. Those words resonated with citizens, especially parents struggling with education. Near the end of the campaign, unexpected supporters appeared. Sis, Caitlin visited the campaign office a week before Election Day. I've wanted to say this for so long, that day, I should have done more. The sisters embraced and cried. Elizabeth later secretly sent a message of support. While relationships with their parents remained unrepaired, the sisterly bonds were slowly healing. Then, Election Day arrived. Abigail Murphy has been elected as the new mayor. At 28, she becomes the youngest mayor in city history. On the victory platform, Abigail made a promise. Once a week, I will clean City Hall. Because this building belongs to all citizens. And because I believe any work can be an opportunity for growth. 1 year after taking office, her policies were steadily bearing fruit. The establishment of the Education Support Center. Library renovation. And the development of the Together with Citizens program. At 29, the mayor carefully cleans City Hall's hallways every Monday morning. Citizens have warmly embraced this site. Think manicured nails don't suit someone holding cleaning supplies. When asked by a reporter, Abigail smiled. But this is who I am. Not seeking perfection, but taking steps forward, true to myself. Those words captured many young people's hearts. On social media, her words spread with the hashtag #BeYourself. Media began calling her the new generation reformer. However, in Abigail's heart, the memory of that rainy night remains vivid. Change begins with one person's small step. Those were the closing words of her mayoral inauguration speech. And those words were her own life story. That morning was a Monday like any other. Mayor Abigail Murphy had arrived at City Hall at 6 a.m. as usual and was polishing the hallway with cleaning supplies in hand. Morning sunlight streamed through the large windows, making the polished marble floor gleam. Suddenly, a familiar voice rang out. "My, what fitting work for you." Turning around, she saw her parents standing there. It was their first meeting in 20 years. Her mother Jane, though showing traces of age with silver in her hair, still maintained her elegant bearing. Her father Thomas appeared somewhat diminished, but his eyes remained as cold as ever. "We came because we had something to discuss, but I never imagined." Her mother looked disdainfully at the mop in Abigail's hands. "I didn't expect to find you doing cleaning work." Abigail slowly set down the mop. The memory of that rainy night 20 years ago came rushing back in an instant. But now, she no longer trembled. "Cleaning suits you," her mother's voice retained its former sharpness. Abigail smiled quietly. Standing straight, she responded in a calm voice. "I am the mayor." A silence fell over the hallway. The blood drained from her parents' faces. Her father involuntarily stepped backward. "Impossible." Her mother's voice shook. Just then, a secretary appeared with documents. "Mayor, here are the materials for the 9 a.m. Education Support Center Management Meeting." Abigail gracefully accepted the documents and turned back to her parents. "The welfare department is on the second floor. Would you like me to show you to the elevator?" Her voice was warm, yet filled with dignity. The girl once called a failure had become the town's leader. The morning sun streaming through the windows gently illuminated Abigail's figure. A week later, the Brookhaven Education Support Center held its opening ceremony. The renovated old factory building shone in the early spring sunlight, as if symbolizing the town's hope. Today, we take a new step forward, Mayor Abigail spoke gently from the podium. This place is open to all children. Those gifted in mathematics, those who love history, those with artistic talents. Her parents were in the audience. Though they hadn't been sent invitations, their presence as prominent community members was expected. Her mother maintained a rigid expression, while her father held up a newspaper as if to hide his face. For special recognition, I'd like to introduce Ms. Carol Foster. Abigail's voice trembled slightly with emotion. 20 years ago, she saved a lost little girl. And today, her teachings have become the foundation of this support center's philosophy. As Carol took the stage, the venue erupted in applause. Though aged, her eyes hadn't lost their former sparkle. None of us is perfect, Abigail delivered her closing words. What's important is acknowledging and supporting each other's imperfections. I believe this is true education and the path to a genuine inclusive society. After the ceremony, her sister Caitlin approached. That was a wonderful speech, Elizabeth stood beside her. We should have recognized your worth much sooner. Their parents left the venue silently. But there seemed to be a faint glimmer of tears in their mother's eyes. A month later, the support center was bustling with local children. Abigail spent every Friday afternoon there. Mayor, this book is interesting. In the library corner, a young girl held up Changemakers, the same book Carol had given her 20 years ago. Abigail smiled and replied, yes, it's a story about people who chase their dreams. Outside the window, spring rain fell gently. But now, it was no longer a rain of sadness.